Thank you very much for having me here. May I just ask how many regulators are here in the room? Okay, at least 3 I saw, is that correct? So we're a small group as well. The question or the topic I am supposed to speak about is what is, from the perspective of a regulatory agency, what is our role and responsibility in relation to the quality of the research literature? And well, the brief answer would be, in relation to the research literature, none. We have no responsibility towards the research literature. But of course, we have certainly have a role in the quality of the evidence compiled when it comes to ensuring the efficacy and the safety of medicinal products, and to a lesser extent of medical devices. So, to begin with, I would like to start a brief story, a brief overview on a story of fraud and scientific misconduct. And, well, the reason why I'm telling this is just to explain what potential role a medicines agency could have if we detect fraud. I don't know who of you knows that story. So that's based on an Austrian study performed in the west of Austria and published in The Lancet, and it's about, well, at that time it was called stem cell therapy to treat urinary incontinence. It's not a stem cell therapy, but if it is anything, it's a sort of advanced therapy. But anyway, and we've been informed that there was no ethics committee approval. So we sent our inspectors, looked at the data, and we found a lot of major problems. So yes, it was not, the ethics committee was not consulted appropriately, but there were other reasons as well. There was no proper insurance coverage. Patients did not consent, well, at least not all of them. So there were faked patient agreement signatures, and probably for you of particular interest, some of the data were fabricated. So there were some data until 6 months, and then they were sort of very liberally extrapolated to a 1-year follow-up. Of course, there was no 1-year follow-up. So we had these findings and thought, what are we going to do with that? Because from a legal point of view, even though we have now these findings, of course, this treatment will never be authorized with these data, that's for sure. But we still have a problem. What to do? In terms of legal circumstances, the Austrian medicines law says that if we detect a problem and it's longer than 6 months ago, it's sort of invalid for us. So there's no legal point anymore. And of course, that trial happened 2 years before our inspection. So that's bad. So what we did, and well, let me tell you a bit about cliches. I like cliches because they sort of give you, well, an average impression how groups of people behave. Even though it's unfair to the individual, for a group it's true. And we Austrians have we follow the cliche that we are rather pragmatic, sometimes more on the opportunistic side, but generally rather pragmatic. And what we did is, of course, we could not break the law. We could not make that public. And we informed, of course, the health ministry, the science ministry, the dean of the faculty. And then we informed the Lancet and said, well, we inspected a trial. We cannot tell you what we found, but ask the dean if everything was okay. And so that got the whole thing rolling. Okay, so that could be our role. Of course, it would be nice if we had more liberty to be more open with the results, but for the time being, that certainly is not possible. Okay, so what is our responsibility? We have a responsibility in the whole life cycle of a medicinal product. So, and in particular, of potential interest to you is this area where we give scientific advice. So this is a process defined in community law, how that works. So we do that at the European level, but also at the national level, which is only partly sensible, but still it happens. Of course, we look at manufacturing. We do authorize clinical trials. So every member state has a competent authority authorizing clinical trials. And actually, even though ethics committee very often don't know that. It is the competent authorities authorizing a trial, not the ethics committee. We are responsible for marketing authorization, and then once on the market, we have pharmacovigilance, so we have the safety signals and all the risk management, trials, follow-up trials, and post-authorization safety and efficacy trials, so that's something improved now in the European Union. And then, of course, you have variations and renewals and all that. Just to give you an impression, marketing authorization, in Austria we have about 11,000 authorized medicinal products, but only about 3,500 substances. In the European Union, we don't even know how many authorized medicinal products we have. I guess about 300,000, and the same 3,500 substances. And every product has about 2 to 3 life cycle changes per year. So you can imagine what kind of administrative burden that is, apart from the scientific assessment, which also happens repeatedly again and again in parallel and redundantly, by the way. But we're getting better at that. But before I go on, I would like to explain the network, how the network works, because even though I'm representing the Austrian Medicines Agency, I'm part of a larger network. So you have, currently it's 48 national competent authorities, NCAs, so that always changes. Some are merged, some are separated again, some are outsourced from the ministry, put back in the ministry, so that's a constant flow. And overall, there are more than 10,000 full-time equivalents working for regulating medicinal products in the European Union. And then you have the European Medicines Agency. And here there's also a sort of misconception what this agency is and does. So the European Medicines Agency is not something like the US FDA. So it's not a sort of super agency with all these committees deciding on the fate of medicinal products, but it's a sort of scientific secretariat manned by members from these national competent authorities. So we send our people to the European Medicines Agency, and in the average, every national competent authority puts about 20 to 30 full-time equivalents of work every year into that system. And of course, again, for you of more interest, because all the interesting new substances come through the European Medicines Agency, and rightly so, because this is where we pool our resources and even more so our expertise. So nevertheless, we have about 100 authorizations per year via the centralized procedure, and only about 10 new substances, roughly. And of course, at the national level and the European level, there are various ways of authorizing medicinal products. We authorize about 1,000 medicinal products every year. Usually, they are generics. So this is the main part of our work. So, quality of the research literature, do we live up to a certain role we can have? And I think the question is, or the two main questions that I can think of is, are we transparent enough? And can we improve how we assess medicinal products? 5 minutes? Okay. I think Peter was very kind with the European Medicines Agency, how they dealt with their requests, because of course I know the story from both sides, and I spoke to Tom, well, I had an email correspondence with Tom Jefferson on that, and I guess most of you know parts of the story where you tried to get the information and the EMA declined because it was confidential, and there was a tit for tat, and at the end of the day, the European Ombudsman said, EMA, you have to deliver. And at the end of the day, they did, but I think they should have done much earlier. And of course, then there was this publication exchange between you and a group from the European regulatory agencies. And, well, in brief, you are asking for having all the data out there to have everyone access to these data. And the regulators replied, well, okay, but there's a problem with confidentiality. I personally do not agree. I think it's rather a question of a process, how you make data accessible. And of course, in some cases, it might be tricky, but that can be regulated. Another issue that worried regulators are spurious and false positive results generated by doing lots of meta-analysis with more or less the same data. Well, we know the problem, but again, I think openness is the only remedy against it, because it's going to happen anyway, either with complete or with incomplete data. Well, one thing Hans-Georg Eichler claimed in that paper, and it's a pity that, because I was asked to be a co-author of that paper, but I was not available at that time, is they said, well, we would give out the data if we can ensure a general adoption of established quality standards of meta-analysis. Well, what do you say to that? I think we have these standards. Maybe they would need to be more sort of officially endorsed and acknowledged. Okay, well, that's a process we can make happen, so that should be no problem. And the last point is establish rules of engagement. So when you ask for data, you would need to submit a study protocol. Well, again, if it's a Cochrane review, you have that. So that's quite easily. So can we, I'm almost done, can we improve the assessment? At the level of scientific advice, I don't think so, because this is such a fast-moving process. Even though there's much to be gained at that level, the assessment times are very short. A lot of these substances submitted for scientific discussion and advice never see phase 1 anyway, or never go beyond phase 2. So I think this is not the good point. In improving clinical trials, I rather don't think so, because looking at clinical trials, we look at, here we have a different duty. We look at the benefit or the non-harm to the individual patient. So we don't look at the protocols, whether they are of high scientific standard. That's what the ethics committees are doing. We are rather looking is the patient protected in the best possible way? Authorizing medicinal products, yes, I think here a lot could be gained, and of course that's a sort of vision, and I'm not sure whether many of my colleagues share this vision, but I really believe there should be a public open peer review. So all the data should be put out there, like in, I don't know, astrophysics, they have, for example, this kind of peer review, and everybody can look at it. And of course, then you would need to define arbitration mechanisms. Who at the end of the day says what is the right thing? But again, that is possible. So I believe the solutions or potential solutions is engaging the academic community on a very open base, and sooner or later it's going to happen anyway, because sooner or later we have only very few substances to be assessed. So it will happen. It's just a question, will it be a good process or will it be a painful process until we're there? And of course, there should be certainly much more transparency. Thank you very much.